Hello everyone, my name is Hamid from We Buy Any Card. We are a small independent magic dealer in the United Kingdom. We also deal a little bit in Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh, but mostly we do magic. I wanted to make this series of videos to share with you some of the collections that we have coming in. We get a lot of interesting stuff, and if you're somebody who likes seeing old magic cards or even some of the newer stuff, then I think this is something that you might enjoy watching, hopefully. In the last week or so, we received one of the more fascinating collections that I've ever seen personally. The reason for this is because the person who sold it to us was a player from 1993 to 1995. And at that point, he stopped playing and put his collection away into storage for over 20 years. And what that meant is that when we found it, it had pretty much not been touched for that entire time. Now, he knew the value of the cards, but he never got rid of them. He always decided to keep them until last week. And so what we have here is a little bit of a snapshot into what maybe what an average Magic collection would have looked like around 94 or 95. And for reference, this is a collection that was bought in England. And there was a small supply of alpha and beta that made its way to the south of England, and that he was able to purchase. For example, here we have some starter decks. We have a starter deck of Unlimited. Obviously, this is just the empty box. It's not the sealed deck. Then we have this one here from, this is an alpha. And this is a beta. And I did have to ask around to find out the difference. And the difference is the barcode on the bottom. So if it has the barcode, it's a beta. And if it doesn't, then it's an alpha. Now, I don't think I've ever had an alpha starter deck come to us before. I've seen one a couple of times, but it's a very unusual thing to have preserved all these years. And you can see on the Unlimited one, he has written red on it because that's what he liked to play. He played a red deck. And as we go through the collection, you see that some of the red cards have more wear than the other colors. And that's just because the other cards were, he opened them and stored them away or traded them. And the red cards he would put in his deck. Now, there's a lot of different sort of facets to this collection. And so I'll have to move through it fairly quickly. I won't be able to go through every card, show you everything. First, I wanted to show you some of these Arabian Nights cards, just because it's a set that's quite popular right now. Arabian Nights has seen a big resurgence in popularity and price over the last. Hang on, let me just get the. There we go. Yeah, in price and its popularity has sort of increased quite a lot. And we see that these are some fantastic examples here of basically untouched Arabian Nights cards. I guess this Ali from Cairo, despite being red, didn't make it into its previous owner's deck. So it's actually a near pristine copy. Very nice. Dancing Scimitar, Jandor's Ring. Not the most powerful effect, but definitely worthwhile. Here's an Urnamjin though. And this card is very expensive, and when you see it in a condition like this, as you almost never do, the price, I believe, probably in the region of about £500 for something like this. The rest of the cards here are not, they're mostly commons and uncommons. There are some fairly decent things here, but I'll just move through them a little quicker, just because we have a lot to get through. Oubliette, Stone Throwing Devils, Raiders, Desert Nomads, three Curt Apes, almost a playset. And the next set I want to go to is Antiquities here. Now, there's a handful of good cards here. This Triskelion, a Winter Factory, two other factories. He did tell me while we were discussing the collection that he was going for all four factories, and expressed a lot of relief that he had been able to get this one, because obviously it's worth a lot more than the rest of than the other versions, rather. Hercules Recall. A good example of a card that has been reprinted multiple times. And obviously you probably wouldn't see art like that on a modern Magic card, but this version in this sort of condition has a huge premium over something like a more recent printing. And we're talking sort of, between 20 and 30 times more expensive, potentially. Here's the Transmute Artifact, which obviously is a card that sees a good amount of play in Commander and has seen a big price increase now. As this is being filmed in March 2021, this card has roughly doubled in price over the last couple of months. And just a good amount of cards, something like this, Shatterstorm, obviously multiple reprintings, but if you get it in the black bordered frame in the old and good condition, it does command a pretty high premium. And good amount of interesting cards here. Couple of rares, some Urza's Lance. The next lot is from Unlimited. Now I won't go through everything because unlimited commons and uncommons are only so interesting. But here's some of the more expensive parts of it. We did find this Savannah in the collection, and it is in absolutely beautiful condition. Not perfect, a couple of little nicks at the bottom there, but generally would grade this as sort of excellent to near mint. If you're going to sell cards of this caliber, you pretty much are always going to be sending photos to the buyer, and so it's always the sort of more prudent thing to do, because people have different expectations about conditions and such. But this is a beautiful copy. And I'll just sort of skim through some of these other unlimited cards. There's a clone. Ice Storm. Birds of Paradise. Very nice. Kudzu. Cyclopean Tomb. Copper Tablet. Basalt Monolith. Jade Statue. This. A Raging River. Swords to Plowshares. Sarah Angel. Crusade. Doppelganger. Let's put that one aside. Sengir Vampire there. Couple of Dark Rituals. Couple of Red Elemental Blasts. A Lightning Bolt. Power Surge and a Rock of Care Riches. Nothing too interesting, but definitely we should stop and have a look at this Vesuvian Doppelganger. Now, this is a card that's shot up in value in the last couple of months, and this is a very nice example. Beautiful condition. And same with Raging River. Very pretty card. Now, the next couple of things I want to show you are first beta and then alpha. This gentleman who owned this collection didn't particularly collect alpha or beta. It's just that those were the cards that happened to be available. That's what the shops were selling when he got into the game. It just happened to be there when the first Magic cards arrived in the United Kingdom, and I bought a few starter decks and a few booster packs and traded with his friends. Now, these are all from beta, and mostly they're in pretty good condition. And I'm not going to stop at every card, but I will highlight some of the more interesting ones. Okay, zombies. Force of Nature. That's a rare. That's a very nice card. A little bit of wear there, unfortunately. Definitely seen a bit of play, that one. Giant Growth. Regrowth. Very nice copy. Wall of Ice. Grizzly Bears. 3 copies. Oh, there's an interesting one. I forgot that was in there. So this card is a miscut card and a crimped card. So when a magic booster is pressed to be sealed, like this one, you can see it has that effect. Very rarely, the card gets caught in the machine that does it. I think it's called a crimping machine, but not entirely sure. And it creates this crimp effect on the card. Now, I had to ask around in one of the misprint groups to find out whether this is something that people generally are interested in, because we don't really get many of these cards. They're extremely rare, especially from this era. And the answer is yes, this is definitely something that some misprint collectors take a great interest in. You can see that the machine, actually, I'm just going to put another card here behind it. The machine is actually cut off part of the card. So that sort of whole line there, the card is just gone. And another thing that you see is when you get a crimped card, generally the crimp is just at the very top of the card, but this is a very clean crimp because it's almost as though the card were sticking out of the booster when it was sealed. So I wonder whether when this booster was opened, whether it just didn't seal properly, or whether the card was just sticking out when it came out of the box. It's quite interesting. And then another question is whether you can see the crimp is quite deep and quite pronounced. Whether this was the only crimped card in the pack, and whether the others might be out there that would have come from the same pack. But anyway, this is something quite fascinating and very rare. Keep going through the beta cards. Disintegrate. Stone Rain. Another Disintegrate. Earth Elemental. Fireball. Very cool. And 2 lightning bolts. I will just pull these out of the sleeves because beta lightning bolts are something quite special. This one is very, very off-center, unfortunately. And as I told you before, the gentleman did like to play his red decks. So generally the red cards in the collection are more heavily worn than anything else. And this lightning bolt shows some significant play wear. Take a look at the other one. Better centering on that one and a lot less play wear. A couple of dents across the surface, but not too bad. And just a few more beta cards. There's a Crusade. I'll have a look at that one. Jade Statue, Basalt Monolith. Very nice. Still an EDH staple today. Copper Tablet. Black Vise. Oh, and a Taiga. There were only 2 dual lands in the collection, and I don't think people generally prioritized so much trading for dual lands back in 93 and 94. Certainly this gentleman did not. There was a couple other cards that he told us that he traded for in a collection where he would have only opened the boosters and starter decks. We would not have expected to see as many lightning bolts as we did in this collection. That's because he traded for them. I do just want to dwell a little bit longer on this Taiga because it is a beautiful example of a beta dual land. That's a little off center, but the corners are a little dinged up. But generally, a very nice copy. And the final part of the collection that I want to show you is Alpha. Now, there was a lot of more things like beta dual lands and beta lands, basic lands, and unlimited basic lands, but I don't think these are really worth going over here. But some of these alpha basics are definitely worth having a bit of a look at. I think it was about 35 of them. Very pretty. And now for the final part of the collection are the alpha cards. Just moving things around a little bit. And here we have the alpha commons and uncommons, and a couple of rares actually also. A quick explainer on the difference between alpha cards, how to tell them apart, is the corners. You see that? Alpha cards have just a slightly more rounded corners, so usually you can tell. It's not too difficult to do. One unfortunate fact is that this gentleman, when he had sent us the initial list of the collection, he had included about 140 alpha cards. This stack that I have here is what was actually there, and this is I think it's about 80 to 85. So he had misjudged some of his alpha cards, which were actually in fact beta cards, and that did have a significant impact on the final price that we could pay him, and dropped the price by I want to say about 15%. But we still made a very strong offer on the collection, and I think we paid between £8,000 and £9,000 for it. And here are some of the alpha cards, which for me personally are my favorite part of this collection. And we'll just go through these. I'm just going to pull out some of the more interesting things here. Raging River. There are 3 alpha lightning bolts. Llanowar Elf, Berserk, Giant Growth. If you play the Alpha 40 format, or if you play old school, these are all fascinating things to see. If you love these old cards, then I think you're going to appreciate some of these and the condition that they're in. Corvus Bell has a very unique effect on the game and does some weird things with cards like Urborg and other effects. Very interesting. I think this Gauntlet of Might is potentially the most expensive single card in the collection. It's very well loved, as you can see. As I mentioned before, the gentleman who owned this, he liked to play red decks, and he actually told me that he traded for this card. So I imagine that was to be able to put it in his red deck, because it only really does anything in a red deck. And even though, despite its years of, or maybe a couple of years at least of play, it's not too bad. It's not something we probably would want to grade, but it's definitely still playable today. Giant growth. This art always kind of scared me as a kid. Berserk. Multi-format. Playable staple. Even nice and limited versions of this card can go for upwards of £100, and I'm not entirely sure how much this will fetch, but it's a very nice card. Llanowar Elves still pops up in standard every so often. And 3 lightning bolts. Now, as I said, he did like his red decks, so these all have a bit more wear than we'd like, but still pretty nice example. I don't know if this is... Might try to see if we can get that little... I think that's just a piece of dirt there. And lightning bolt. Same on this little piece of dirt there. I'm not sure if that will come off or not. Raging River is a card that I just find kind of fascinating because it has such a unique effect on the game, and while it is kind of tedious to do and maybe not practical if you were gonna put some effect like this in a modern tournament setting, a modern Magic tournament setting, it's quite fun to do. I've always enjoyed it, and it's just so weird, you know. Word of Command is another card that, you know, it really, both these two cards really highlight some of the creativity of these early cards. We don't really see many effects that do what Word of Command do, and it's kind of dangerous to put something like that into Magic because it can be a very powerful effect if it's not done right. But spooky eyes and a Cinco. Not too bad. A little bit of a scratch on the back there, but... And 2 Dark Rituals. Very iconic card, obviously. Water Elemental. I just like this card. I know it's not worth that much or anything, but... It's just weird to see this little man with a... this wave staring at him. And a Disenchant. There was actually one other thing that we did find in this collection. Just as I was going through some of the unlimited basic lands, I did find this, which is quite special. This is Summer Magic Plains. Now, normally we wouldn't even look for these because they're incredibly rare. I think only a few hundred of these planes probably even exist. And I imagine the owner probably traded for this without even knowing what it was. He was probably just trying to get some lands for his deck. But a few of these boxes were known to have made it to the UK of Summer Magic, and we don't, like I said, we don't normally check for these, if even in older lots, because it's just so unlikely, and it's hardly worth your time because obviously I've never found one, and this was the first time. And there was a lot of about, I want to say maybe 50 to 70 unlimited basics, and this was hiding in there. It's something quite special. I think in terms of value, it might be worth a couple £100. But if you compare this with something like this, a beta, you can see the colors pop out a lot more, and it's quite a nice card. That's all I have to show you today. We will be doing more collection videos like this in the future. Let me know if this is something that you found interesting or enjoyed watching. If you have magic cards to sell, then you can find us on our website, www.webuyanycard.co.uk. Thank you for watching, and see you soon.